One of the most interesting things about youth voter turnout in the 2004 elections was simply that youth voters actually came out and voted. So across all ethnic groups, the rate of youth turnout was higher. And it was specifically great amongst African American and Hispanic youth. One of the most important things about the youth vote in the 2004 election was the way in which the candidates themselves structured and aimed their rhetoric and their appeals towards these two demographics amongst African Americans and amongst youth in particular. And so on the left, what you saw was a reliance on what I refer to as this vote or die strategy, which was a slogan used by many of the hip-hop celebrities. And so it was a rhetorical strategy that sort of built on some of the old language and rhetoric of Malcolm X. We remember the sort of phrase, the ballot or the bullet that he used, which was used to sort of signify that there was an urgency, and need for blacks to be involved in the political process, that the time was now, and that there was a need for African Americans to close ranks, to sort of put aside their differences so they could pursue this common goal. In contrast, on the right, what you saw was an interesting sort of story with the Bush campaign and those on the right who traditionally have not garnered much support amongst African Americans generally, and certainly not among African American youth. And so on the right, they decided that they would not simply give up on the African American vote. And they certainly looked to some evidence of having Condoleezza Rice and other high-profile African Americans in the Bush administration as a way of saying, look, when you look at the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, who is it really that are putting African Americans in positions of power? The appeals to Latino youth in the 2004 election were somewhat different than that amongst African American youth and those targeted towards that demographic. In most part, they followed the traditional patterns of what seems to work amongst Hispanics, and that was less sort of rhetoric, if you will, but more actual voter mobilization, whether that's through personal contact, phone calls, knocking on doors. So for instance, in somewhere like Colorado, where you had a high-profile Senate candidate with Ken Salazar, who is of Mexican descent and heritage, and so you have him being the sort of dominant voice of support both for his own candidacy, but as well for John Kerry amongst Latinos in Colorado, and then both of those candidates being successful. When you look, say, in Florida with Mel Martinez, a Republican from Cuban descent, you have sort of the similar but flip side of the story, where he is the one that is the face of sort of Latino politics there and driving many of the mobilization efforts, both for him and the president at the top of the ticket there. What differed between Bush and Kerry, and the reason I think that Bush was much more successful, was that he targeted his appeals differentially towards Hispanic youth and towards Hispanic adults. Bush really targeted his message in a sort of two-pronged front to do both the mobilization, but also to really talk about some of the wedge issues that really sort of garner some sense of Latino support, whether that's immigration, or talking about naturalization of recent immigrants, border control, those kinds of things. And so I think that is really what drove the support amongst Latinos. And so what you saw was almost 40% of Latino youth that voted for Bush, where that percentage was much lower than it was for Kerry. I think that when we look at the 2004 elections and the strategies that worked, that didn't work with regards to both youth voters as well as to Latino and African American youth specifically, I think we're likely to see many of the same strategies, particularly in this our current election cycle in 2008. Often the question, both with Latino youth and African American youth, is not sort of persuading them about the sort of ideological difference or what side they're on. It's really a matter of getting them out to the voting booth on that day. And so I think you're likely to see much of the same strategy used to sort of garner a large army, if you will, of Latino youth who will go out in Latino communities, knock doors, pass out literature. When we look at African Americans, I think that you will also see some of the same strategies. I don't know that there will be as much of a concerted effort amongst Republicans and the right to try to recruit African Americans, both in terms of voter support as well as sort of support of leadership and so forth. I think we're likely to see sort of a diminishment with which the right sort of spends its time and energy trying to court black support, black vote. I think the circumstances make it difficult for them, and I think that they will have sort of many more battles to fight where they are likely to not spend so much time and effort there.